The bell rang loudly through the hallways of Oak Ridge High School, marking the start of yet another long, uneventful afternoon. The sun streamed through the tall windows of the music room, lighting up the dust floating in the air. Students shuffled in lazily, chatting and dragging their feet, ready for what they thought would be another boring music class. Mr. Reynolds, the music teacher, was known for his sarcasm and odd sense of humor. He strutted into the room, holding his clipboard and adjusting his glasses. "All right, class," he said dramatically. "Today we're doing something special. We're going to have a little performance session. Who wants to embarrass themselves first?" A few students laughed. Some groaned. Mr. Reynolds scanned the room, his eyes stopping at the back corner where a quiet girl sat alone, sketching in her notebook. Her name was Mia, known to most as the janitor's daughter. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and always seemed to disappear the moment class ended. With a mischievous smirk, Mr. Reynolds pointed his finger. "How about Mia?" Heads turned. The class went silent for a second, then laughter followed. "Mia?" Someone chuckled. "She's never even touched a violin." Mr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Exactly. Maybe it'll be enlightening." Mia froze. Her face turned red, and she looked down at her notebook. She wasn't sure if this was a cruel joke or just another moment where she'd be made to feel like an outsider. Her father, the school janitor, was well-liked but often pitted, and that pity spilled over onto her. She stood up slowly. "Okay," she said softly. The room hushed. A few students looked at each other, surprised she didn't refuse. Even Mr. Reynolds blinked, not expecting her to accept. Mia walked to the front where the spare instruments were kept. Among them, she saw an old, scratched violin. Her eyes lingered on it for a moment. It wasn't just any violin. It was the one her father had rescued from the trash behind the school auditorium months ago. He had cleaned it, repaired the strings, and brought it home with a smile. "I know it's old," he had said, "but I thought you might like it." Since then, Mia had taught herself how to play, not with lessons, but through YouTube videos, tutorials, and long hours in the janitor's storage closet where no one could hear her. She picked up the violin, ran her fingers gently across the strings, and stepped onto the small classroom stage. Her heart pounded in her chest. The room still buzzed with whispers and giggles. Mr. Reynolds crossed his arms, amused. "Let's hear it then, Miss Janitor." She didn't respond. She raised the bow, took a deep breath, and placed the violin under her chin. The first note squeaked slightly, nerves. A few students snickered. But then, her fingers moved, and the second note rang clear. Then another, and another. The laughter stopped. Her hands began to glide smoothly. Her bow moved with purpose, the notes swelling into a melody that no one had expected. It wasn't a popular song. It wasn't something they'd heard before. It was something raw, something honest. It was hers. Mia poured everything into the strings. The loneliness, the pain of being overlooked, the hours she spent practicing in secret, and the love she had for her father, who never once let her feel like she was less than anyone else. The classroom was still now. Even Mr. Reynolds had stopped smirking. His arms dropped to his sides as he leaned slightly forward, listening. The melody rose, soared, and then softened. Her eyes stayed closed as she played, lost in the world she had created for herself. A world where she wasn't the janitor's daughter, but an artist, a musician, a storyteller. As the last note faded, the room remained silent. Not because no one knew what to say, but because they were still caught in the afterglow of what they had just heard. Then, a single clap. It came from the back of the room. Mia looked up and saw her father standing by the door, mop in hand, eyes wide and glistening. He had come in quietly, unnoticed. The moment he saw his daughter on stage, he had stopped to watch. The pride on his face was unmistakable. More claps followed, slowly at first, then stronger, until the whole class was applauding. A few students even stood up. Mia stood still, stunned. She hadn't played for approval. She had just wanted to prove that she wasn't a joke. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. His face had changed, no longer mocking, but thoughtful. "Well," he said finally, "that was unexpected." Mia didn't smile. She nodded, placed the violin back on the stand, and walked back to her seat without saying a word. Her heart was still racing, but for the first time, it wasn't because of fear. It was pride. And though no one said it aloud, everyone in that room knew. The girl they had laughed at had just shown them something real. something unforgettable. The days following Mia's performance were different. Whispers followed her in the hallways, not the cruel ones she was used to, but hushed admiration, surprise, and curiosity. Did you hear her play? That was insane, bro. Like actual talent. She's the janitor's daughter, right? Who knew? For once, the label didn't sting. In fact, it carried a different weight now, pride. Mr. Reynolds, too, seemed to be going through a quiet transformation. Gone was his usual sarcasm and smug demeanor, replaced by a thoughtful quietness. In the next music class, he called Mia to his desk before anyone else arrived. I misjudged you, he said simply, without looking her in the eyes. That was the most powerful thing I've heard in this room. Ever. Mia nodded. She didn't need his apology, but hearing those words mattered. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a flyer, State Youth Music Showcase. Open to public school entries. First prize, $2,500 scholarship plus professional mentorship. You should audition, he added. We can submit a video. If you want, I'll help. Mia hesitated. The idea was overwhelming. She had never performed in public before. Not really. That classroom performance had been an accident of fate. Could she do it again, in front of judges, strangers, competitors? She looked down at the flyer. At the bottom, in bold letters, we're looking for unique voices. Don't just play. Tell a story. Her heart stirred. That she could do. That weekend, Mia and her father turned the janitor's closet into a makeshift studio. They moved the buckets, mops, and tools aside. Her father installed a small light, polished the old violin again, and even borrowed a better mic from the computer lab. Mr. Reynolds, true to his word, showed up on Saturday morning. He brought sheet music, but Mia gently pushed it aside. I want to play something I wrote, she said. He blinked. You compose. I write what I feel. I don't know if it's real composing. He smiled, for the first time with true warmth. That's the only real composing. They recorded the video in one take. Mia played her own melody, a new one, but drawn from the same soul as before. It spoke of quiet strength, of being overlooked, of rising up when no one believed you could. When she finished, even Mr. Reynolds looked a little shaken. You don't need my help, he said quietly. You've got something I can't teach. They submitted the video. Then, they waited. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Mia's hands trembled as she opened it. Congratulations. You have been selected as a finalist in the State Youth Music Showcase. You are invited to perform live at the Capitol Hall on June 10th. Her father stared at the email, speechless. Then he pulled her into a hug so tight, she almost dropped her phone. You did it, he whispered. You really did it. The following days moved fast. Arrangements were made. Her father took on extra shifts to afford the bus ride to the Capitol. Mr. Reynolds helped polish her routine. The school even donated a decent violin for her big performance. Not because she asked, but because the students had signed a petition. Something had changed in Oak Ridge High. The day of the showcase, Mia stood backstage at Capitol Hall, surrounded by students in designer dresses and expensive violins. She wore a simple white blouse, black slacks, and the necklace her mother had left her when she was little. She wasn't dressed like the others. Her violin still bore scratches, but she held her head high. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with quiet confidence. The lights were bright. The judges sat stone-faced. The audience was full. She took a breath, closed her eyes, and played. This time, her music told a new story, one of transformation. It began in shadows, just like her life had, slow and uncertain. Then came the rising, the struggle, the laughter turned to silence, the first taste of validation, the hope. Her fingers moved faster, stronger. Her melody swirled around the grand hall, lifting hearts, raising heads. People leaned in. Some shut their eyes. Some cried. She ended with a single soft note, one that hung in the air long after the bow left the string. Silence. Then, thunderous applause. She stood still, overwhelmed. Somewhere in the back row, her father was on his feet, clapping harder than anyone. She didn't win first place. A prodigy from a private school took that. But Mia received the Judge's Choice Award for Emotional Excellence, a new award created just that year. It came with a mentorship offer and a scholarship. More importantly, it came with validation, proof that music from the heart, even without polish or prestige, could change people. Back in Oak Ridge, she returned not as the janitor's daughter, but as Mia. Just Mia, a musician, a storyteller. Mr. Reynolds updated the wall of fame in the music room and added a new photo, Mia, holding her violin, with the caption, "Talent can come from anywhere. Listen before you judge." And in the evenings, after the halls emptied, the sound of a violin could still be heard coming from the janitor's closet. Not because she had to practice in secret anymore, but because it was where it had all started.